And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Dave Kerpen. Dave is a serial entrepreneur. He's a New York Times bestselling author. He's a global keynote speaker, and he's the co-founder and co-CEO of Apprentice. He's also the founder and chairman of Likeable Local. So I want to welcome Dave aboard today. Welcome aboard today, Dave.
Thanks so much for having me, Peter.
Great. So you're an interesting fellow, to say the least. You've got a lot of different hats that you wear: author, speaker, thought leader, entrepreneur, CEO. I want to talk today a little bit about how thought leadership sort of plays a role in all of those. So where the books come in, where the speaking comes in, and how it sort of connects to and supports the various business interests that you have. So let's start there for a moment.
Sure. I think as an entrepreneur, my goal is to impact the world to the greatest extent possible. And, thought leadership, as you call it, or writing and speaking is a really great way to influence people at scale. Most people don't have businesses like Facebook and LinkedIn and Apple that impact, hundreds of millions of people. But with books and with content and with speaking, we can impact thousands or even hundreds of thousands or millions of people with our work. And that really gets me very excited.
So let's talk about you can impact, but it's also a differentiator, right? So every business today is competitive, and what I'm seeing more and more of is people that are on the business side of the house are using thought leadership and authorship and speakership as a way to stand out amongst the crowd, right? So has that been true for you?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think to a great extent, a book is a humongous business card if it's done right, and absolutely, we've been very fortunate to generate tons of business from our thought leadership. When I say our, I guess I mean both my wife and me.
Right. So you're in an interesting position where it's pretty much a husband and wife team on the thought leadership, which is not that common. So tell me how that dynamic works.
Yeah. So I think I really started with my first book several years ago, and really then using that to get into the speaking circuit, and written a bunch more books since then. But my wife took up. It was a very good playbook for us, and so she jumped in and did the same with a book and speaking and podcast and video show and all that stuff. And so we've done a lot of stuff separately. We've done a little stuff together, and we actually have some really great stuff to come together because it is fairly unique. There's not a ton of husband and wife teams
Right.
out there. Melinda Gates. There are obviously some others, but they're not a ton. And we know that we can add a lot of value individually, but we can add even more value together and help all the couples and families out there that are in business together.
Interesting. So let's talk about authorship from the other side of it for a moment. So you've written several books. If someone's out there today that's either they haven't written their first book, or maybe they've written one or two and they're going on to the next one, what are the things that you would counsel them to be thinking about and looking at when making decisions around whether they go a traditional publishing deal, a self-publishing deal, how to promote it, how to market it? Give us sort of some of the things that you've learned along the way and that you would take into account as you make future decisions.
Yeah, well, there's an awful lot, and
Yeah.
um, it's a really, really hard process. But certainly for me, it's been worthwhile, and for others, I'm sure worthwhile. The good news is that it's the best time ever to self-publish. That being said, it's easy for me to recommend self-publishing after I've already reaped all the benefits of having a New York Times bestseller with traditional publishers. So, what I do counsel people to do is to seek out traditional publisher first because there's not a lot of downside there, and if it doesn't work out, you can always self-publish. The most important thing, whether you self-publish or publish with a traditional publisher, is having a platform. And a lot of people do the book first and then realize, oh no, I have no platform. And you really have to do it the other way around. You have to build the platform. You have to build your audience along the way.
So let's talk about the nuts and bolts of that, because I agree with that 100%. As people say, okay, I'm going to write this book, and then once I write the book, then I'll build my platform and followers. And it's like, no, actually, rewind the clock 2-3 years to start that process before you put the book out into the universe. So, what are the things that you've done and continue to do to nurture followership and develop the platform so that as you have new things coming out, you've already got receptivity.
Yeah, great question, and probably one of the most common questions I get. How do I build my audience? How do I build my platform? So, a number of principles here. The first thing, of course, an obvious thing I would think is to create and share great content all the time, consistently, reshare it, repackage it. People want to follow and share great content. The second thing is to build a tribe of people that are going to share your content for you, and giving them incentives. Maybe you're sharing content for them in exchange for them sharing content for you, or maybe you're giving them prizes, or I don't know, giving them discounts or whatever it is. But having lots of folks out there that are naturally incentivized to share your content. The next thing is connecting with is punching above your weight. So sharing content about and writing content about people that have lots of followers already. So the more you interview those folks and feature those folks, the more they're going to share your content with their audience and help to build your audience. And I would say the last thing, this is the easiest but the most expensive, is just use paid advertising. All the social networks have built in, paid opportunities to essentially pay for followers, buy, advertise in order to build your audience that way too. I guess one more bonus is to leverage new platforms. So I was one of the very first people to become a LinkedIn influencer, and that me gain a massive following on LinkedIn. When you experiment with a new platform and you're an early adopter, that can often help you build an audience quickly. Now that may end up not being a very effective platform, but that's the chance you take. And if
Sure.
and if it ends up being big, well, then you're one of the big, if influencers, et cetera, on fill in the blank network.
So you mentioned constantly putting content out there, reformatting it, repackaging it, put it out in different modalities. Do you have some guidelines, some rules of thumbs around cadence? Because some of the worst things I've seen is somebody sort of decides this week they're going to dive into short form, or Facebook Live, and they do 10 of those, and then they stop, and then they want to be a Twitter expert, and they're tweeting like crazy for 3 weeks. But what's the right sort of cadence, sort of cross platform?
Well, the first challenge I'll say is I agree with you about well, I call it deserted island syndrome. What happens is people get on a particular
Exactly.
platform and then they disappear, and then it really looks like they don't know what they're doing, or they're not in business anymore, or they literally have just disappeared. So that's key. So before you join a network, it's important to make sure that you're committed and you're going to follow through with content over time. The other thing that I was talking about that you asked about is sort of repackaging and repurposing the same content. And the thing is, you can do this a remarkable number of times without an issue. And the story I like to tell, Quora, a Q&A site, where somebody posted the question, what's the most interesting experiment that you've run? And the top answer to that question is somebody that posted an experiment where he changed birthday on Facebook to the current day. And he said he was going to change his birthday on Facebook to the current day every day until he didn't get any happy birthday wishes.
So how long did that last? How
It
long?
lasted over 300 days. Over
So he got
300.
happy birthdays for almost a year.
That's correct. And so the moral of the story is, at any given time, far fewer people and a far smaller percentage of our overall audience is paying attention than we'd like to think. And so when we think, oh, I've already shared this content, the reality is chances are that 5% or less of your audience has seen the content, which means that you can
Sure.
probably share it 10, 20, 50 times. My favorite thought leader that does this is Dory Clark.
Yep.
But there are
Yep.
lots of great examples of folks that do it. But Dory, well, she'll take the same article and she'll share it 10 times with 10 different headlines,
Yep.
and she'll get a lot of leverage out of that. And so often we spend a lot of time and energy on content only to share it once and then put it to bed.
Well, I think a lot of people think, well, I already published it once, and I think your point's an important point. Depending on how many followers you have on Twitter or people you're connected to on LinkedIn or whatever, the odds of all your followers staring at the screen at the same time when you hit post are slim to none, right? So the reality is that the larger your followership gets, you said 5%. I'd argue it's probably closer to 1 or 2%. So, Dory repackaging with a different headline and putting it out again, some people feel like, oh, but some people will see it twice. The percentage of people that will realize you've put out the same thing 2 or 3 times is minuscule. and they probably won't be offended by it.
That's right. If it's good content, it deserves more of an audience. And in fact, you have an obligation, if it's good content, to share it multiple times. I've been doing this for 10 years and I have never gotten one person. Now, given they may have just unfollowed me, of course, I have no way of knowing that, but I've never got one person complaining to me, Dave, you already shared this content. Not once out of
Yeah.
millions of people and thousands of shares. So I think that we just decide in our heads that we've already shared it, but in reality, it's just a myth.
Or as creatives, it's more fun to go create the new thing, not efficient, but more fun. If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts. Touch on a little bit of sort of repurposing in multiple formats. So I know one of the things that we work on with our clients is if you've got a blog post and that thing takes off, let's turn that into an infographic, into a video, into some sort of, some other format, because we've already done some market research and people have given it the thumbs up as a blog post. What are the metrics that you use, or what do you look at to say this is something I should repurpose in a different format or not?
Yeah, great point. Lots of times when content does well, when it resonates, right? So, depending on what metrics you're looking at, it could be reach or engagement or click rate, through rate, etc. But you know when you have content that resonates, and then there is almost always an opportunity, to your point, to repackage it. Actually, my last book, The Art of People, Simple Skills That Will Get You Everything You Want, came from an Inc. article that I did. It was an article that took off, 5 ways to get everything you want, and it just took off. And I was like, wow, this is really great content. I talked to my agent and write a book on this. And, lo and behold, one thing led to another, and a whole book was born out of it. So I think whether it's a tweet or an infographic or a blog post or a podcast or a video or even a whole book, there are so many ways to take great content and chop it up and repackage it and repurpose it to create even more great content.
So I want to talk for a moment about two ways to monetize your content: direct and indirect. So direct would be, someone buys your book, cha-ching, there's some money to be made. Someone hires Dave to speak, you get paid to speak. Indirect is as a result of your content being out in the universe, however that is, in columns, books, etc., that you're getting attention to your businesses, and the businesses are now acquiring clients. You're not selling the content directly in that case. Could you talk about the differences between the two or the parallels?
Sure. Most people don't get rich off of the content alone.
Right.
And, I know very, very few authors that are making, are building careers on authorship alone, as an example.
Right.
Though, of course, it's nice. And I've been very, very fortunate in my last couple of books to get some great advances. I am definitely not complaining.
Yep.
But to your point, it's the indirect opportunities that are much more lucrative, or certainly have been for me. We've gotten literally millions of dollars worth of business from folks that have read my book or my wife's book or seen us speak.
So if that's the case, Dave, so in each of your businesses who your target client is, the problems that your business solve, etc., does that, or I should say, how does that shape the content you're creating and where you're putting it out from a deployment standpoint?
Yeah, it's important to be thoughtful about that. And I do run into folks that don't necessarily have alignment with the content they want to put out and their businesses. And I think that that's okay. But, you're sort of going in then, you need to go in knowing that you won't necessarily have the same impact on your businesses. So to your point, it's important to be thoughtful about A, who your target audience is, and B, really just what they need and what will benefit them. I mean, for instance, my newest business called Prentice, and we match CEOs and entrepreneurs with college students. I don't need to write a lot of or create a lot of content around the value of hiring a college student. I can simply create a lot of content that I know entrepreneurs and CEOs will find valuable, because at the end of the day, they are driven to that content. They eat up that content and they sort of want to learn more. And
Yep.
so as long as I'm solving a problem that they have that ends up working. So I guess the short of it is that it's more important to nail the right target audience for your content that is the right target audience for your business than necessarily the content itself.
Right. And the flip side of that, what I was going to say is it also guides you in what not to do. So I wouldn't expect to hear content from you on, the 5 problems every middle manager faces, or the 5 problems of a newly minted sales guy in the tech business, because those aren't your peeps, right? You're going after entrepreneurs and business owners, the things that keep them up at night. And if you're trying to shape content in such a way to get them to be thinking about apprentices, that's a guiding sort of light as well.
That's right. And that's a very important principle. Now, the downside for me is that I have 3 companies right now, and we do have 3 different audiences. But
Yep.
to your point, none of them are either of the use cases that you suggested, middle managers or
Yep.
newly salespeople. So yeah, so the more you know what not to talk about, the more that helps you guide what to talk about. And focus is so important in business and in life, and certainly in content creation and thought leadership. No different. Focus is it's super super important and valuable.
100%. Well, as we start to wrap up here, Dave, any final words of wisdom? No pressure.
Yeah, right. What I would say is that in this field, it's easy to get frustrated with when we can't drive early ROI, and I see a lot of people say, "Oh, this isn't working. I'm going to give up." Whether that's Twitter or getting a book deal, and of course, like anything, the goal that the rewards come to those that are persistent and don't give up, and it's the same thing here. And after 10 years of a lot of content, I was an overnight success. And I'll close with a story. We were one of the first to have a marketing blog when we started our first company, Likeable Media, 11 years ago, and we named the blog Buzz Marketing Daily. And it was just me and my wife at the time, and a couple of interns. And my wife said, you can't name it Buzz Marketing Daily because then you got to write every day. And I
Right.
said, exactly. And we're going to write every day, and no matter what, and we're just going to that's going to force the issue. And several months later, we were one of the highest traffic
Yep.
blogs in the world because of that. So it's like anything, you got to put the work in, and you have to be persistent. But at least in my experience, I am certainly very very glad that I did.
Great. Well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing your journey with us, Dave. And I wish you the best. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.